Chapter 1. Ambush at Dawn. The sun had barely begun to cast its first light over the dense jungles of Quang Tri Province. Private James Mitchell, a 23-year-old soldier from a small town in Nebraska, adjusted the straps of his backpack and wiped the sweat from his brow. He had always been a farm boy, more accustomed to the open fields and the predictable rhythms of the seasons. The jungle was a different beast altogether, unpredictable, unforgiving, and teeming with life and danger in equal measure. James was part of the 3rd Platoon, Bravo Company, deployed near the Laotian border. Their mission was to patrol and secure the area, ensuring that the Viet Cong couldn't use it as a route for their incursions. The men of the 3rd Platoon had grown close over the past few months, relying on each other for support, humor, and the occasional letter from home. As they moved in formation, James couldn't help but think of his family back in Nebraska. His father, a World War II veteran, had been both proud and terrified when James had enlisted. His mother had cried, holding him close, her face buried in his uniform. And his younger sister, Emily, had made him promise to write every week, a promise he had kept religiously. Lost in his thoughts, James was jolted back to reality by a sudden explosion. The world around him erupted in chaos. Bullets whizzed past, and the air was filled with shouts, screams, and the deafening noise of gunfire. The platoon had walked straight into an ambush. "Get down!" "Return fire," shouted Lieutenant Harris, but his voice was barely audible over the cacophony. James dove behind a fallen tree, his heart pounding in his chest. He took a deep breath, trying to calm his racing mind, and began to fire in the direction of the enemy. But the dense foliage made it nearly impossible to see where the shots were coming from. In the midst of the firefight, a mortar shell exploded nearby, sending James flying. He passed out. When he woke up, dazed and disoriented, he picked himself up and realized he had been separated from his platoon. The sounds of battle were now distant, muffled by the thick jungle. Panic set in. James had to find his platoon. He had to get out of this jungle. But which way to go? The dense vegetation seemed to close in on him, and every direction looked the same. Taking a deep breath, James decided to head east, towards the rising sun. He hoped that by doing so, he would eventually find a familiar landmark or, better yet, his platoon. But as he ventured deeper into the jungle, the eerie silence was only broken by his own footsteps and the distant echoes of warfare. Little did he know that the real ordeal had just begun. Chapter 2. Lost and Alone. The oppressive heat of the jungle weighed heavily on James. Every step felt laborious, the mud beneath his boots threatening to swallow him. The canopy above was so thick that it felt like dusk, even though it was mid-morning. The chirping of insects and the occasional distant call of a bird were the only reminders that he wasn't entirely alone in this vast green maze. James tried to recall his training, the survival techniques he'd been taught. Stay calm, stay focused, and always be aware of your surroundings, Sergeant Reynolds had drilled into them. But nothing could have prepared him for the overwhelming sense of isolation that now consumed him. He took out his compass, trying to maintain a steady eastern direction. But the jungle had a way of disorienting even the most seasoned soldiers. After what felt like hours, James stumbled upon a small clearing with a shallow stream. He knelt down, cupping the cool water in his hands, letting it soothe his parched throat. As he sat by the stream, he tried to piece together what had happened. The ambush had been swift and brutal. Were any of his platoon mates okay? Was he the only one lost? The weight of these thoughts bore down on him, and he felt a pang of guilt for being separated from them. Determined, James decided to follow the stream, hoping it would lead him to a larger water source or even a village. As he walked, he began to notice peculiar markings on some of the trees. They looked deliberate, like symbols or signs. Could they be markers left by his platoon or another unit clinging to this glimmer of hope? He decided to follow them. But as he continued, the symbols became more frequent and intricate. They didn't resemble any military markings he was familiar with. Instead, they seemed ancient, as if they'd been there for centuries. Night began to fall, and the sounds of the jungle grew louder and more mysterious. Every rustle in the bushes, every distant animal cry sent James's heart racing. He set up a makeshift camp by the stream, using his backpack as a pillow and his rifle by his side. As he tried to drift off to sleep, the haunting echoes of the day's battle replayed in his mind. But amidst the sounds of gunfire and explosions, a new sound emerged, a soft, rhythmic drumming, echoing through the jungle, drawing closer and closer. James gripped his rifle tightly, straining his ears, trying to discern the source of the sound. But the jungle, with its many secrets, remained inscrutable, and the drumming faded as mysteriously as it had begun. Sleep remained elusive for James that night. The jungle, he realized, was alive with its own stories, and he was now a part of them. Chapter 3. Echoes of War. The first light of dawn filtered through the dense canopy, casting a pale glow over James's makeshift camp. The eerie drumming from the night before still echoed in his mind, making him question if it had been real or just a figment of his imagination. Rising from his resting spot, James decided to continue following the stream. The ancient markings on the trees seemed to guide him, though to where, he wasn't sure. As he walked, the weight of his isolation pressed on him. The jungle was vast, and every tree, every shadow looked eerily similar. Suddenly, a distant sound caught his ear, a faint staccato of gunfire. Hope surged through him. It could be his platoon, or another allied unit. Quickening his pace, he moved towards the sound, his senses heightened. But as he got closer, the sounds of warfare became more pronounced, yet oddly distorted. Instead of the familiar sounds of M16 rifles, he heard the rapid fire of machine guns and the distant booms of artillery. It was as if he was hearing echoes of battles from a different era. Hesitantly, he approached a clearing and was met with a sight that sent chills down his spine. The remnants of an old battlefield lay before him, rusting helmets, discarded weapons, and skeletal remains still clad in tattered uniforms. Some of the equipment looked like it was from World War II, while others seemed even older. In the center of the clearing stood a dilapidated radio set. Curiously, James approached it and was startled to hear it crackle to life. Voices spoke in languages he couldn't understand, their tones desperate and urgent. They seemed to be calling out for reinforcements, reporting positions, and crying out in pain. Shaken, James backed away from the radio. The realization hit him hard. This jungle had witnessed countless battles over the centuries, and the echoes of those wars still lingered. The drumming, the distorted sounds of warfare, the ancient markings, all were remnants of the souls who had been lost in this very jungle. Determined to escape this haunted place, James continued on, pushing the chilling sights and sounds to the back of his mind. But as he ventured deeper, he couldn't shake off the feeling that the jungle was watching him, its ancient trees bearing silent witness to his journey, and the many who had come before him. Chapter 4. The Temple in the Thicket. The oppressive heat of midday bore down on James as he trudged through the thick underbrush. The haunting echoes of past battles still weighed heavily on his mind, making every rustle and shadow seem like a lurking threat. But as he pushed forward, the dense foliage began to thin, revealing a sight that took his breath away. Before him stood an ancient temple, its stone walls covered in moss and vines, but its architecture unmistakably grand. The entrance was flanked by two massive stone statues, their features worn away by time, but their imposing presence unmistakable. Drawn to the temple, James approached cautiously. The entrance led to a dimly lit corridor, its walls adorned with intricate carvings depicting battles, rituals, and scenes of daily life from a bygone era. The air inside was cool and musty, a stark contrast to the humid jungle outside. As he ventured deeper into the temple, James discovered a central chamber illuminated by shafts of light from the broken ceiling above. In the center stood a stone altar, and above it, a large mural depicting a warrior in mid-battle, surrounded by spectral figures. The warrior's face, though worn by time, bore a striking resemblance to James. Shaken by the uncanny resemblance, James's attention was drawn to the base of the altar. There, inscribed in a language he couldn't recognize, were names, hundreds of them, each meticulously carved into the stone. As he ran his fingers over the inscriptions, he realized with a jolt that some of the names were familiar. Names of soldiers from his platoon, names from stories his father had told him about his comrades in World War II, and even names from tales he'd heard as a child about ancestors who'd fought in distant wars. The weight of the realization bore down on him. This temple, hidden deep within the jungle, was a memorial to warriors from different eras, all lost to the unforgiving wilderness. As night began to fall, James decided to take refuge in the temple. The chamber provided a sense of security, a respite from the haunting echoes of the jungle. But as he tried to rest, the soft, rhythmic drumming from before began to resonate through the temple walls. This time, however, it was accompanied by whispers, voices of the lost, calling out to him. James clutched his rifle, his eyes darting around the chamber. The spectral figures from the mural seemed to come alive, their shadows dancing in the dim light. The whispers grew louder, their tone pleading, sorrowful, and warning. Panicking, James grabbed his gear and fled the temple, the voices echoing in his ears. As he plunged back into the jungle, he realized that the temple's secrets were just the beginning of his ordeal. The jungle had many more stories to tell, and he was now a part of them. Chapter 5. Whispers of the Lost. The moon hung high in the sky, casting a silvery glow over the dense jungle canopy. James's heart raced as he sprinted away from the temple, the haunting whispers still echoing in his ears. Every shadow seemed to move, every rustle felt like a lurking presence, and the weight of the jungle's ancient history pressed down on him. As he ran, the rhythmic drumming grew louder, more insistent. It seemed to come from all directions, enveloping him in its haunting cadence. Suddenly, a clearing emerged ahead, and James stumbled into it, gasping for breath. In the center of the clearing stood a massive banyan tree, its roots and branches intertwined in intricate patterns. Beneath the tree, a group of spectral figures sat in a circle, their translucent forms illuminated by the soft glow of fireflies. They were soldiers from different eras, their uniforms tattered and worn, their faces etched with the pain of battles long past. One of the figures, a soldier in a World War II uniform, rose and approached James. "You are not the first to wander into this jungle, and you won't be the last," he said, his voice echoing with sorrow. "We are the lost souls of wars gone by, trapped in this eternal wilderness, our stories forever echoing through the trees." James, though terrified, felt a pang of sympathy for these lost souls. "Is there no way out?" he asked, desperation evident in his voice. The soldier sighed. "Many have tried, but the jungle has a way of ensnaring those who enter. However, there is a legend of a sacred relic hidden deep within the jungle that can free the souls trapped here. But no one has ever found it." Determined to escape this haunted place and perhaps help the lost souls, James decided to seek out the relic. The spectral soldiers, sensing his resolve, offered their guidance. "Follow the path of the fireflies," the soldier advised. "They are drawn to the relic's energy and might lead you to it." With a newfound sense of purpose, James ventured deeper into the jungle, following the trail of fireflies. The spectral soldiers' whispers became a guiding chorus, their stories of bravery, sacrifice, and loss echoing through the night. But as he journeyed on, the path became more treacherous. Vines seemed to reach out and grab him, shadows shifted and morphed, and the whispers grew more urgent. The jungle, with its timeless grip on lost souls, was not going to let go easily. Chapter 6. Rescue and Revelation. The first light of dawn began to pierce the dense canopy as James continued his pursuit of the elusive fireflies. Their luminescent trail weaved through the jungle, leading him over treacherous terrain and across murmuring streams. With every step, the weight of exhaustion bore down on him, but the hope of finding the sacred relic and the whispers of the lost soul spurred him on. Suddenly, the fireflies converged, forming a radiant beacon around a moss-covered stone pedestal in a secluded glade. Atop the pedestal lay a pendant, its gemstone pulsating with a soft, ethereal light. As James approached, the whispers grew louder, their voices filled with anticipation. Hesitantly, he reached out and touched the pendant. A rush of energy surged through him, and visions of battles, camaraderie, and sacrifice flooded his mind. He saw the faces of the spectral soldiers, their lives, their final moments, and their entrapment in the jungle's timeless embrace. As the vision subsided, James felt a profound connection to the lost souls and a deep understanding of the jungle's mysteries. Clutching the pendant, He whispered a vow to honor their memories and free them from their eternal prison. Suddenly, a familiar voice pierced the stillness. "Mitchell, Mitchell, is that you?" Startled, James turned to see a search party from his platoon emerging from the underbrush. Among them was Lieutenant Harris, relief evident on his face. "We've been searching for you all night," he exclaimed. "We found the remnants of your camp by the temple and feared the worst." As they embraced, James realized that the pendant had vanished from his hand, leaving only a faint luminescent residue. The fireflies, too, had dispersed, their guiding light now replaced by the rising sun. As the platoon made their way back to base, James recounted his ordeal, the ancient temple, the spectral soldiers, and the mysterious pendant. While some dismissed it as a hallucination brought on by exhaustion and trauma, others exchanged uneasy glances, having heard legends of the jungle's haunted past. Back at base, as James was being treated for minor injuries, he noticed a peculiar mark on his forearm, a tattoo of the pendant, its design identical to the one he had held. The whispers, though fainter, still lingered, serving as a haunting reminder of the jungle's timeless grip on lost souls. That night, as James gazed at the vast jungle from the safety of the base, he knew that his connection to it was far from over. The echoes of the lost would always be a part of him, their stories forever imprinted on his soul. Chapter 7. Echoes Remain. Weeks turned into months, and the horrors of war continued to unfold around James. Yet, amidst the chaos and carnage, the memories of that fateful night in the jungle remained etched in his mind. The tattoo on his forearm, a constant reminder of the spectral soldiers and the mysteries of the jungle, often drew curious glances and questions from his comrades. One evening, as the platoon gathered around a campfire, sharing stories and seeking respite from the day's battles, James was prompted to share his tale. As he recounted his ordeal, the haunting whispers, the ancient temple, and the mysterious pendant, a hush fell over the group. Some listened with skepticism, while others, having experienced their own unexplainable encounters in the jungle, nodded in understanding. Sergeant Reynolds, a grizzled veteran with deep lines etched into his face, spoke up after James finished. "This jungle," he began, his voice low and gravelly, "has seen centuries of conflict, of souls lost and trapped. Every soldier who set foot here carries a piece of its history, its echoes. Some hear it louder than others." The fire crackled, casting dancing shadows on the faces of the soldiers as they pondered Reynolds' words. The night deepened, and one by one, the men drifted off to sleep, the weight of their own experiences and memories pressing down on them. James lay awake, staring up at the canopy of stars. The whispers, though distant, were ever present. He realized that the jungle had imparted a gift upon him, a deeper understanding of the sacrifices of those who came before him and the interconnectedness of their stories. In the days that followed, James became a beacon of hope and strength for his platoon. He often found himself guiding and comforting those who struggled with the traumas of war, sharing the wisdom he'd gained from his encounter with the lost souls. As the war raged on, James held on to the belief that every soldier, every soul, had a story worth remembering and honoring. And while the echoes of the jungle would always remain with him, he was determined to ensure that the sacrifices of his comrades, both past and present, would never be forgotten. Chapter 8. Epilogue. The Jungle's Lure. Years had passed since the end of the Vietnam War. The once bustling military bases were reclaimed by nature, and the scars of battle were slowly fading beneath the relentless growth of the jungle. But the stories, the echoes of the soldiers who had fought and died there, lingered on. In a small town in Nebraska, an old man sat on his porch, gazing into the distance. The tattoo on his forearm, though faded with age, was still distinct, a pendant surrounded by intricate patterns. Children from the neighborhood often gathered around him, drawn by his tales of bravery, camaraderie, and the mysteries of the Vietnamese jungle. One day, a young woman named Lily, a journalist documenting veteran stories, came to interview James. As he recounted his experiences, she was particularly captivated by his encounter with the spectral soldiers and the pendant. She had heard similar legends from other veterans, tales of haunted jungles and timeless echoes. After their conversation, James handed Lily a worn-out journal. "I've documented everything here," he said, his voice tinged with emotion. "The stories of those spectral soldiers, the legends of the jungle, and the experiences of my comrades. It's important that these tales are preserved and shared." Lily, inspired by James's stories, decided to embark on a journey to Vietnam. Armed with the journal and a burning curiosity, she ventured into the Cung Tiar province, drawn to the mysteries of the jungle. As she delved deeper, she began to hear the familiar rhythmic drumming, the soft whispers of the lost. One evening she stumbled upon the ancient temple James had described. The stone statues, the mural, and the stone pedestal, all were as he had depicted. But what caught her attention was a pendant, identical to the one in James's tattoo, resting atop the pedestal. As she reached out to touch it, a rush of visions and emotions overwhelmed her. The battles, the sacrifices, and the timeless grip of the jungle. Lily realized that the jungle's lure was not just in its physical beauty, but in its stories, its echoes that transcended time. And as she continued her journey, documenting the tales of the land, she became a part of its rich tapestry, ensuring that the echoes of the jungle would forever resonate with future generations.